Princess Velara of the Korean Empire had made her displeasure abundantly clear from the moment the humans stepped aboard her royal transport. She sat upon her crystalline throne, her violet skin shimmering under the ship's ambient lighting, 4 arms crossed in a gesture that transcended species barriers. Her retinue of guards stood at attention around the chamber, their plasma rifles gleaming with ceremonial polish. The human wore no ceremonial armor. He carried no visible weapons. He simply stood near the entrance in plain dark clothing, his brown eyes scanning the room with what appeared to be casual disinterest. "This is the protection Earth sends?" Velara's translator rendered her words with perfect clarity, though it couldn't quite capture the contempt in her melodic voice. "A single unarmed human?" Ambassador Thorne, the Korean diplomatic liaison, inclined his elongated head apologetically. "Your Highness," the Galactic Council insisted. "The treaty requires human security personnel for all dignitaries traveling through contested space. This is Jake Reeves. His credentials are, I assure you, exceptional." Jake offered a slight nod. He didn't bow, didn't salute, didn't perform any of the elaborate greeting rituals Velara had come to expect from those entering her presence. He simply acknowledged her existence and returned to his apparent study of the ship's architecture. Velara's primary hands tightened on her armrests. "I have 40 of the Empire's finest warriors. I have point defense systems that could atomize a fleet. What possible use is one human?" "Probably none, Your Highness," Jake said, speaking for the first time. His voice was unremarkable, neither deep nor high, carrying no particular authority. "With any luck, I'll just be enjoying the view for the next 3 days." The princess felt heat rise in her cheeks, a physiological response that crossed many species. The audacity of this creature, speaking to her without being addressed, agreeing with her assessment while somehow making it sound insulting. "See that you stay out of the way," she said coldly. The first day of the journey passed without incident. The royal transport, a vessel 300 meters in length and fitted with every luxury the Korean Empire could provide, glided through the void toward the neutral station where peace talks would commence. Velara spent her time in conference with her advisors, reviewing proposals and counterproposals, preparing for the delicate negotiations ahead. Jake seemed to spend his time walking. He moved through the corridors at irregular intervals, never quite establishing a pattern. Sometimes Velara would glimpse him standing in an observation deck, staring at the stars. Other times he would be in the galley, eating simple rations while her own staff enjoyed elaborate feasts. He spoke little, observed much, and remained persistently unremarkable. "He does nothing," Velara complained to her chief advisor, a elderly Korean named Morthus, whose scales had faded to pale lavender with age. "He is decorative at best." Morthus, who had survived 6 assassination attempts during his long service to the crown, simply hummed thoughtfully. "The humans have a saying, Your Highness. Still waters run deep. The humans have many sayings. Most of them are foolish." The second day brought the first sign of trouble. The ship's sensors detected a debris field ahead, the remnants of a recent battle. Captain Vex, commanding from the bridge, requested permission to alter course. "Denied," Velara said firmly. "We maintain our heading. I will not arrive late to these negotiations and give the Federation any excuse to claim Korean unreliability." "Your Highness," protocol suggests. "I am aware of protocol, Captain." "Proceed as planned." Jake, who had been standing quietly in the corner of the bridge, tilted his head slightly. "How recent was that battle?" Captain Vex's tentacles rippled with irritation at the interruption. "Scans suggest no more than 6 hours. Any survivors detected?" "None. The engagement appears to have been total." Jake nodded slowly and left the bridge without another word. They entered the debris field an hour later. Twisted metal drifted past the viewports, the corpses of warships torn apart by weapons fire. Velara watched with clinical interest. She had seen battle before, had even commanded forces during the border conflicts of her youth. Death held no particular terror for her. The attack came without warning. One moment the ship was gliding peacefully through the graveyard of vessels. The next, proximity alarms shrieked as 6 small craft detached from the larger debris, their hulls having been perfectly camouflaged among the wreckage. They were assault shuttles, built for speed and boarding actions, already burning hard toward the royal transport. Evasive maneuvers. Captain Vex commanded. All guards to defensive positions. Protect the princess. The ship lurched as the pilot threw them into a hard turn. Plasma fire streaked past the hull, close enough that the defensive shields flared bright blue. The assault shuttles were fast, far faster than the royal transport, and they closed the distance with predatory efficiency. They're using military-grade dampeners, the sensor operator reported. We didn't detect them until they moved. This was planned. Velara's guards formed a protective circle around her, weapons trained on every entrance to the bridge. Her hearts pounded in her chest, but she kept her face composed. She was Corian royalty. She would not show fear. Where is the human? She demanded suddenly. Morthus checked his communicator. Deck 7, near the primary airlock. What is he doing there? Before anyone could answer, the ship shuddered as magnetic clamps attached to the hull. The assault had become a boarding action. 3 breaches, Captain Vex reported, his voice tight. Decks 4, 7, and 9. Intruders are cutting through the bulkheads now. Velara stood, drawing the ceremonial plasma pistol from her robes. It was ornate, gilded, more symbol than weapon, but it would fire true nonetheless. How many? Scans show 12 hostiles, heavily armed. Your Highness, we must get you to the escape pods. I will not flee from assassins like some frightened child. Hold them here. The bridge doors were reinforced, designed to withstand ship-to-ship weapons. Her guards took positions behind defensive barriers that rose from the floor. If the attackers wanted her, they would have to fight through 40 trained warriors and multiple choke points. The first explosion came from Deck 4, the second from Deck 9, Velara's communicator, filled with reports of combat. Her guards engaging the intruders in fierce firefights. The assassins were skilled, using advanced tactics and weapons that cut through armor with disturbing ease. Then the reports from Deck 7 went silent. Captain, what's happening on 7? Velara demanded. Vex worked his controls frantically. I'm getting no response. The guards stationed there aren't answering. Cameras are offline. A cold feeling settled in Velara's stomach. Deck 7 was a direct route to the bridge. If it had fallen already, the assassins would be here within minutes. The silence from Deck 7 lasted exactly 30 seconds. Then Jake's voice came through the ship-wide communication system, calm and unhurried. Bridge, you're going to start getting confused reports. Don't be alarmed. Situation is being handled. What situation? Captain Vex snapped. Report your status. 4 hostiles down on Deck 7, moving to intercept the Deck 4 group now. Velara exchanged glances with Morthus. 4 down? The human had been unarmed. The sounds of weapons fire echoed through the ship's corridors, transmitted through the communication system, shouting in a language Velara didn't recognize. Sharp cracks that might have been gunfire or breaking bones, then silence again. Deck 4 clear, Jake reported. 4 more down. Captain, you're going to want to seal bulkheads between Deck 9 and Deck 8. The last group is trying to flank through the cargo bay. How did you? Vex began. But he was already implementing the command. On the tactical display, the bulkheads slammed shut, trapping the final group of assassins in a section of the ship with no direct route to the bridge. They'll cut through in about 3 minutes, Jake continued. I'll be there in 2. Velara listened in stunned silence as Jake calmly narrated his movement through the ship. He described the assassins' positions with perfect accuracy, anticipated their tactics, and moved to counter them before they could execute their plans. The sounds that came through the communicator were brief and violent, punctuated by Jake's matter-of-fact updates. 3 down on Deck 9. Last one is running for their shuttle. Let them go? Captain Vex asked, clearly out of his depth. Negative. Can't have them reporting back. A pause, the distant sound of rapid footfalls, then a single heavy impact. 12 down. Threat neutralized. Your Highness, you're clear to stand down. The bridge remained locked in tense silence for a full minute after Jake's final report. Then, slowly, the guards began to lower their weapons, looking at each other in confusion and disbelief. Velara found her voice. Bring him here, now. Jake arrived 5 minutes later, escorted by a squad of guards who seemed uncertain whether they were honoring him or placing him under arrest. He looked exactly as he had when he left the bridge, his clothing undisturbed, his breathing even. The only sign of combat was a small cut above his left eyebrow, and what might have been someone else's blood on his right sleeve. Report, Velara commanded. Her voice sharper than she intended. Jake glanced around the bridge, noting the defensive positions, the raised barriers. The weapons still held at ready. 12 assassins, probably hired by someone who doesn't want these peace talks to succeed. They used a fake battle debris field as cover, waited for a target to pass through, then executed a coordinated boarding action. Standard pirate tactic, but with military-grade equipment and training. I disabled their shuttles after neutralizing the threats, so we can tow them back for intelligence analysis. You were unarmed, Morthus observed quietly. I was, Jake agreed. They weren't. Seemed unfair to them, in retrospect. Captain Vex brought up the security footage from the decks where combat had occurred. Velara watched, her forearms falling slack at her sides as the recordings played. Jake moved through the corridors like water flowing downhill, inevitable and unstoppable. He used the ship's architecture, turned the assassins' weapons against them, struck from angles they couldn't defend, and disappeared before they could retaliate. It was the most efficient violence Velara had ever witnessed. How? She asked simply. Jake shrugged. I walked the ship yesterday and today. Learned the layout, identified choke points, noted which systems could be accessed quickly. When they attached to the hull, their magnetic signature told me their approximate mass, which indicated how many we were dealing with. After that, it was just math and timing. Just math and timing, Velara repeated slowly. You disabled 12 trained killers with math and timing. And borrowing their weapons after the first few went down, Jake admitted. Your Highness, if you're willing to take a suggestion, you might want to review your guard rotation protocols. I counted 8 separate instances where someone could have planted a tracking device on your ship during a last port visit. That's probably how the assassins knew your route. Morthus leaned forward, his old eyes bright with interest. You noticed this in 2 days? It's what I do. Velara felt something shift in her perception, like an optical illusion suddenly resolving into clarity. The unremarkable human who had seemed so pointless, so decorative, had been working since the moment he arrived. His walks through the ship hadn't been aimless. His silence hadn't been deference. He had been learning, planning, preparing for a threat he hoped would never come. Why didn't you say anything? She asked. About the security flaws? Would you have listened? Jake asked simply. 2 days ago, on this bridge, you made it clear you considered me useless. I could have given you a full report on every vulnerability I found, and you would have dismissed it as human arrogance. Better to stay quiet and be ready. The truth of his words stung worse than any of the assassin's weapons could have. Velara had been so certain of her own superiority, so convinced that human involvement in galactic affairs was mere political theater, that she had blinded herself to the value standing right in front of her. "I was wrong," she said clearly, her voice carrying through the bridge. "I judged you without knowledge, dismissed you without cause, and endangered my mission through arrogance. You have my apology and my gratitude." Jake nodded, accepting both with the same unremarkable calm he brought to everything else. "The peace talks are important. I'm glad I could help them stay on schedule." As the royal transport resumed its journey, now accompanied by a destroyer that Captain Vex had frantically summoned, Velara found herself watching the human with new eyes. He had returned to his wandering, walking the corridors as he had before, but now she understood what she was seeing. Every step was purposeful. Every glance had meaning. He was a weapon wrapped in mundane packaging, dangerous precisely because he appeared so harmless. On the third day, as they approached the neutral station, Velara summoned Jake to her private chambers. He arrived promptly, showing none of the nervousness her previous visitors displayed in her presence. "The peace talks will last 6 days," she said without preamble. "After that, I have other diplomatic missions, other journeys through spaces that may not be entirely safe. I am authorized to request continued security arrangements." Jake waited patient. "I would like to request you specifically," Velara continued, "if you're willing." "I'm assigned where I'm needed," Jake said, "but I'll put in a word that I'm willing. Why do you do this?" The question escaped before Velara could stop it. "You could command armies with your skills. Instead, you walk quietly beside people who don't appreciate your value." Jake smiled, the first real emotion she'd seen cross his face. "Someone wise once told me that the best protection is the kind you never notice. If I do my job right, Your Highness, you'll arrive at your destination safely and never quite remember I was there. That's not glory, but it's worth doing." Velara regarded him with her 4 eyes, this unremarkable human who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. In her long life, she had known warriors who boasted of every victory, politicians who preened with every success, advisors who demanded recognition for their counsel. Jake simply did his work and expected the outcome to speak for itself. "Earth chose well when they sent you," she said quietly. "Earth has a lot of people like me," Jake replied. "We're not special. We're just paying attention." After he left, Velara stood at her viewport, watching the stars drift past. The galaxy was vast and old, filled with species who had mastered space travel when humanity was still learning to control fire. It would be easy to dismiss the young race from that small blue world, to consider them inferior simply because they arrived late to the cosmic stage. But the Corians had a saying, one that Morthus had tried to remind her of: "The youngest star burns brightest." Perhaps it was time to learn what other lessons the humans had to teach. If only she could set aside her pride long enough to listen. The peace talk succeeded. The treaty was signed, and Princess Velara of the Corian Empire began what would become a long career of human-secured diplomatic missions, though she never again made the mistake of assuming her escorts were pointless.